Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Diamond Bandits. I'm Oren Phillips.
I'm Mike Farah.
And we often say that we have big interviews, and it are big interviews, but believe me, this is a very big interview. It took some time. We were able to get it. We were able to sit down and speak with Mr. Jim Shooter. It was somebody who was on the very top of our list from day one, who we pushed and pushed and pushed to get. And thankfully, I met him at Terrificon last year, was able to speak to him. And he agreed, and we're so happy that he did.
Yeah, Jim Shooter is one of the luminaries of the comic industry, former editor-in-chief of Marvel, of Valiant, of Defiant, of Broadway. He's been really one of the, as I said, sort of towering figures in comics, and really excited to hear Oren's interview. This is an Oren Only interview. And we're so happy he was able to make it. Joe and I are kicking ourselves for not being able to make it. But we want you to enjoy this, and I will stop talking so you can. So this is our interview, or rather Oren's interview, with Jim Shooter.
So today's guest, the legendary Mr. Jim Shooter. Mr. Shooter, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. This has been something we've been waiting for a long time.
My pleasure.
Your career in the comic industry is basically could be a comic itself. You started at such a young age doing some writing for DC Comics. As a young man, was it ever overwhelming or scary at all being there with all these luminaries discussing books?
I don't know. I was too young and naive to be afraid. I mean, I just, besides, I mean, I really needed to do it. I needed the job. And so I just pressed on. I didn't even think about it.
Were there any lessons you learned in those early days that carried on throughout your whole career?
Oh, many. Yeah. I mean, like I learned the fundamentals of storytelling. I worked for this editor, Mort Weisinger, and he was mean as a snake, but he taught me so much. I can't tell you. I mean, he even, when I lived in Pittsburgh, which is 400 miles from New York, where the office was. And, but I would come up there fairly regularly and work in the office for a couple days or a week. And yeah, can you imagine a 14-year-old getting on a plane, flying 400 miles, going to an office, checking the hotel, nobody bats an eye. It's just all fine. It works in the office. Nobody says anything. Not today, they'd arrest the parents,
yeah.
But in those days it was fine. So anyway, I go there, and while I was there, they teach me things, and I learned all kinds of things. I kept wondering, why are they teaching me this stuff? Like in-house production, printing production, distribution, marketing, licensing, international, all kinds of stuff, and also the business of the business. Or the economics of the comics, and I used to wonder why they were doing that, and especially because the guy yelling at me all the time, telling me I'm a moron. And I thought, why? And well, his assistant told me. He said he's training you to have a job like his. And I said, me? Why? But they did, and that stuff all came in real handy down the road. When I didn't end up working at DC doing a job like his. I ended up at Marvel. And all that stuff came in real handy there. It's editor-in-chief. I'm on the phone with the printer. I could use the right words. I talked to the production of people, use the right words. They knew I knew what I was talking about. So yeah, that stuff followed me all my life, and also a lot about storytelling, writing in general.
I was going to ask you, in your mind, what is the necessary ingredients to make a story that will keep fans coming back and getting the next book and the next book and the next book?
Well, it sounds corny to say, and this is just the beginning of the speech, but care about it, make it mean something. Pour your heart into it. And also learn your craft, learn your fundamentals, understand what a story is. And try to keep developing. A lot of people, a lot of these guys writing. I don't know. I don't think they have any training at all, except they read a lot of comics. And I got a lot of training about that, and I learned the fundamentals of story and storytelling, and did a lot of research on my own. Aristotle was the first guy to really codify it. He wrote a book called The Poetics, and he tried to figure out what a story was and why I like this one and I don't like that one. And I don't recommend this book; it's a hard read. And then Horace, 350 years later, Roman poet, scholar, big fan of Aristotle's. He thought he maybe had some ideas to contribute that. And he wrote a book called Ars Poetica. Again, I don't recommend it. I mean, but the ideas in it live forever, and the fundamentals are the same, and it's the same in any kind of storytelling medium. The bedrock is the same.
Was there any story that you wrote at the time that really in your mind cemented that you belong in this industry, that you really feel like everything came together just as you want and this was the right choice for you to be where you are?
Well, no, I don't. I mean, I did the best I could every time, and I think I had a couple of real not so good stories, but I kept getting smarter, better, and I felt like I really knew what I was doing. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years into it, I felt like I had command of it, and then it's just like, all right, now what do you got to say? It's all right, I know how to do it. Now what do I have to say? Do I have a good story? Can I think up ideas and express them compellingly? That's, knowing what you're doing is only half the battle. You have to care about it and make it mean something.
How far ahead do you plot out the stories that you come up with? Is it just you? I know some people do issue by issue, but did you have a long run in mind when you came up with a lot of these stories?
Oh yeah. I mean, it depended on the book, but even if I was just doing sort of single issue stories that were not going to form an arc, I was planning well ahead. I mean, I tried to always. I didn't want to paint myself into a corner. I wanted to know where I was going, and like Secret Wars, I had that thing all plotted out pretty tightly. Maybe 8 months before it went on sale. So
when you made the jump to Marvel, I know there's this idea that DC was very corporate, very buttoned up, shirts and ties. Marvel was a lot more, free flowing.
you bet.
For you, I mean, when you jumped over there, was it just a total mind blowing experience, or did you have some premonition that this is what it's going to be like there?
It felt like going home. I mean, it was more comfortable. Now, having said that, I will tell you that in the late 70s, 1970s, Marvel was kind of a train wreck. It was less corporate, less stuffy than DC, but a lot of people used that kind of relative freedom, and some real unprofessional and even criminal stuff was going on there. And so it was kind of had its own kind of snake pit, but it was completely different and a lot more like, us guys rather than, the suits.
When you see all this happening, when you go there, do you have to bite your tongue a little bit, or were you vocal about, hey, this set shouldn't be happening?
Man, no, I'm not quiet about stuff. Let's face it. When I got there and I saw that everything is late, I'm like, how can you do this? I mean, and I said that to everyone, and was very vociferous about what I thought was wrong, what I thought should be fixed. Which, when I became editor-in-chief, kind of by surprising people, it scared a lot of people. That, oh my God, what's he going to do? He's going to be Mussolini. He's going to, be horrible. And I don't think I was. I think I helped it. I think I fixed it a little bit, and it became a better, more like a business, more like a creative business, and that's what I was going for. And we got great people, and we made it happen.
When you spoke about becoming editor-in-chief, did you feel prepared for the job? Did you think you were at that level to take that responsibility, or were you somewhat nervous?
Oh yeah, I was 26 years old, but I'd been in the business 13 years, and I like I said, Mort had trained me. I knew what I was talking about. That's one thing, you know. I mean, all the editors in chief there. If people say I'm the ninth one, no, I'm the seventh one, and that's only if you count Stan. Stan never called himself editor in chief; he just called himself editor. So the first was Roy, the second was Len, then Marv. There was Jerry Conway for 3 weeks, Archie Goodwin for 19 months, and then me. And then but all the rest of those guys, geniuses, really wonderful creators, but none of them had any kind of administrative background. None of them were trained, and administrator was my way second choice, but that's what we needed, and so yeah, I walked in there feeling very prepared. I thought, compared to what it had been, I thought that, I had some ideas about how to improve the thing and solve the problems. As I said, everything was late. There was corruption. There was a lot of double vouchering. There was some outright theft. There was the previous president had been embezzling $300,000 a year. It was a real serious mess. And so I weeded a lot of that out, because a lot of that was on my floor and among the comics people, and it was, it was a fight there for a while, but we got it done.
I was going to say, as such a young man, how are you handling the stress? Because it seemed like every day trying to tackle these were big issues, like especially getting things done on time. Like that's the lifeblood of the comic industry. I'm sure there's some days you just want to pull your hair out of your head, but how are you handling all that?
Well, I mean, boundless enthusiasm and a never say die attitude. I mean, it was also life or death. We either did it or we're dead. You don't understand. I mean, when I came into Marvel, there was 2 parts of Marvel. There was the magazine people upstairs, Magazine Management Incorporated. That was actually the parent of Marvel. And magazine management was, in the last year before I became editor-in-chief, was losing $2.5 million a year. And Marvel was losing about $1 million. That's bad. It's a small company, and so it was in that first year that I was editor-in-chief, it was bad for all the comic book companies. Warren went out of business. Charles went out of business. Harvey stopped publishing. Archie went all reprint, and on one day in June, DC Comics imploded, and they canceled 40% of their books on one day. So we were like the healthiest patient in the terminal ward. We weren't quite that far. We were in a death spiral too. So it was just, I don't know. You just had to do it, or else it's over.
What were your impressions of the DC explosion idea, and then how it actually ended up with the explosion? Did you think it was a smart idea to make more books, or?
Well, all right. DC Comics at that time was basically a bunch of old guys running it, and there was this woman from Scholastic who had kind of an ugly parting with Scholastic, okay, and she what's her name, Jeanette Kahn, and she actually ended up suing them. And I think her boyfriend at the time was one of the big Warner executives, and so he was helping her with that, and Warner lawyers are representing her. Well, so of course they're not going to. They settled, but they're not going to take her back, and so he got her job at DC Comics. I don't think she'd ever seen a comic book up close in her life. She worked on Scholastic stuff, Dynamite magazine, for instance. So anyway, all right. So she comes in, and after a little while becomes not only the publisher. She brought in as the publisher and becomes the president. And when she came in there, that was great. She sent Mike Hobson a letter. Mike Hobson was the publisher at Marvel. And she sent him a letter. I guess he congratulated her. She sent a reply. And she said she was looking forward to finding out what inking was. Now it's half a joke, but I'm serious. She really didn't have any background in this. And I think to some extent, when your top management doesn't really know good from bad, at least for a while, you know, it leads to problems. I mean, so I think a lot of the people there at that time, the combination of the really old guys and a few young guys whose main qualification was that they read 1,000 comic books. And I think they made a lot of mistakes, and I think that explosion was the biggest. And when the implosion came, they had to get rid of all kinds of people. That's why it was a godsend for me, because the industry was in such turmoil. I was able to get Louise Simonson. When Warren went out of business, she needed a gig. I'd asked her all the time. I used to see her. We would play volleyball in the park, and she would come. And it was always no, no, no. Well, finally, she needed a gig, and I was able to get her, and that's better than Christmas, man. I mean, that's wonderful. And I also got Larry Hama. That's like, you know, winning the lottery. It's amazing. And got a whole bunch of other people who were available. Al Milgram, Danny O'Neill, DeFalco was at Archie, and they went all reprint. You know, I mean, I got all this talent, and the biggest thing was that I got Archie Goodwin to come back on staff, because I wanted to start a creator-owned line, and he was the best man in the world for that. And it's a little hard to come back and to work for a guy who used to be your assistant, because I was the number two. I was Mr. Spock. I was number 2 for about 2 years. And but I convinced him that, you know, there's nothing I'm going to tell you that you don't know. You know, I'm not going to be all over you and manage things. I'll leave you alone. But I will do the parts you hate, which is the dealing with the licensing and he hated bean counters. He hated, you know, just his eyes would glaze over. Smartest man in the world. He could do anything he wanted to, but that just put him off. And so I said, I'll take care of it, because I do it anyway for the comics. I mean, it's one more book. Who cares? So I did. I tried to make it so that he just had to worry about creating stuff and working with the creators. And it was wonderful, because not only was he doing great stuff, but a lot of artists and writers who maybe didn't know me or were afraid of me for some reason, because, you know, oh my God, he's Mussolini. They're looking and saying, well, wait a minute, Archie's there. How bad could it be? You know, Louise is there. You know, how bad could it be? You know, and so they start turning up. And of course, a lot of people just, you know, thrilled to have like Al Milgram or Danny O'Neill or Larry Hama doing their stuff. And so, you know, it all just came together, and it was great. I built the greatest team ever, mostly because they were unemployed. Man, we did some wonderful stuff.
I just wanted to ask you, is it frustrating though? Because like you keep saying that people thought of you as a Mussolini character. Did that frustrate you? Like, you don't even know me. Like, why are you assuming this is how it's going?
Alan Moore never met me, but he was happy to condemn me from any stage he wanted. I was in a line for a buffet, I guess, and right in front of me is R. Crumb, and you know, I said I was a fan of his work, you know, and he just like looked at me and said, "Fuck you." All right, okay, thanks. But you know, I mean, yeah, it was a little frustrating, because you know, I was just trying to make things better and get royalties and benefits and rights and have a creator-owned line, and you know, try to do what I think you would do, what I think anybody who could would do, and so but I just let it roll off my back. I'd worked for the meanest man in the world, Mort Weisinger. Okay, so anything anyone else said to me was just nothing.
Well, I was curious. I wanted to ask you this: how important was it for Marvel to have a figurehead like Stan Lee going out, talking to the media, pushing Marvel comics? And do you think it hurt DC not having someone like that to go out there and sort of spread the word?
Well, I think it was really important for Marvel at the beginning. I think that once we got going, then now the product has to talk, you know. And Stan wasn't involved in the comics at all uh, long before I came in. I mean, when Roy was there, Stan was still kind of he had control and was, you know, micromanaged Roy a little bit. So and Roy didn't have the, you know, Roy, another super smart guy, could do anything he wanted, but you know, he had Stan to deal with, and anytime you have layers of command like that, it gets dicey. Well, I don't know exactly when, but at some point Stan just was not associated with comics anymore. He wasn't even on the organizational chart. You know, he was all about media, you know, whole TV show, cartoons, trying to get movies made. And I had his old job. I ran the comics. Each of us reported to the president. You know, I didn't report to the publisher. I reported to the president, and so did the publisher. But and he wasn't even there for the first couple of years. You know, I was basically the publisher. And Mike Hobson was hired by President Jim Galton not to publish the comics. He was hired to be the publisher of the book line, the children's book line that Galton planned to introduce. Now, but he didn't have authority from the board of directors to start a children's book company. But Mike Hobson became available, and so he hired him, and hid him in the comics, you know, just to keep him on tap. But I'll tell you, having said that, I mean, like when he came in and he was ostensibly a publisher, doing some of what I used to be doing. A, that helped me fantastically, and B, he was smart. He was a seasoned publishing executive, and I was a kid. Let's face it. I mean, I was like 26 when I took over as editor in chief, and you know, maybe 28 or so or 9 when he came in. He helped me out a lot, and I learned a lot from him about sort of regular publishing business, not just comics publishing.
I think it's I'm a huge fan of yours.
No, thanks.
But one thing that I don't think people realize is you were getting pressure from the president. You had to make this company profitable. That's a lot of pressure. Then you're dealing with the day-to-day things with the comic industry. So that's a whole other, I don't want to say headache, but it's more stress that you had to deal with, going, you know, sort of two walls coming in on you every day to make this happen. And then,
the thing, yeah, I hear you. But the thing is, Galton wasn't involved. He didn't care. I mean, he had never opened a comic book in his life and did not want to.
Gotcha.
And when he hired me, Stan recommended, because Stan had gotten to know me, because I was co-writing the Spider-Man newspaper strip with him. I would write the story. I would do my little layouts for John Romita, so he knew what to draw. He doesn't need a lot of help. He just needs to know what's going on. And then Stan would write the dialogue. And so I got to know him a little bit. And so when the job came open, he, of course, had the president's ear, and he advised him, hire me. So he did. When he hired me, he told me that my job was to preside over the death of Marvel Comics, because he thought that comics was a total loser business. He wanted to get us out of that, start a children's book company, and get us into animation. That was his goal. I told him he was wrong. I said, you're wrong. This can be big. We can make it big. You know, it's going to take a while. A lot of things have to change, but we're going to be bigger than Disney. And he just laughed. I mean, it's like, yeah, don't bore me, you know. So I said, well, no. I said, you'll see. I said, we're a long way from that, but we can start. And he gave me a pretty free hand. He says, do whatever you want, just don't lose money. So I almost never heard from the guy. You know, it was just, I could do, and I had a free hand. I could do anything I wanted. And, you know, and rarely he'd come up with some crazy notion, like when Star Wars was a success, then he told me, hey, why don't we just do movies? I'm like, no, it has to be a super movie, you know. But you know, I fended off some of that stuff, but it didn't pop up all that much, and I basically had nobody bothered me, and I was able to. Uh, I want to say I mean we were able to do pretty much what we had to do.
So one of the things you mentioned earlier is something that you helped usher in, the Epic line,
Yes.
their own books. How did that idea come together, and why did you think it was so important to have that as an option for the talent?
Well, I mean, in 1978, that was a hot topic. I mean, the fact that everything at Marvel was work for hire, everything in comics was work for hire, was, you know, it put people off, especially back in 1975 through 80, when comic book creators did not get paid very well. So it's like, wait a minute, I do all this work and you own it? You know, I get nothing. I get the really chump change pay. I mean, the page rates, and the people don't understand, it's page rate only. You got no rights, no benefits, no nothing. And the page rates were not big. I mean, writers were making like the $15 a page. You know, I think Roy was like the highest paid writer we had. And I don't remember what it was when I came in. It was around $20. And then he got a new contract, and then it was 23. And that was like miraculous. Holy cow. You know, and he also had a favored nations clause. Nobody could be paid more than him. But that's, you know, you're in that kind of scale. I had a few artists who were getting like $35 for a penciled and inked page. What? That's like 1950s, you know? So we fixed that. And it was, once I made it a better opportunity, once I made the offer better, then people start showing up. Hey, word gets out. You can make money at Marvel, and there's benefits, and there's rights, and you know, health insurance. You do 3 jobs a year, you can have health insurance, good health insurance. That was, you know, it was a lot of battles to accomplish that, but because I didn't run everything. I mean, I still had to deal with the financial officer and the lawyers and the other vice presidents. I was a vice president, and you know, they had power too, and so you know, I had to do some walking through the minefield there. But it was we got it done.
Did the Epic line, do you think it was as successful as you hoped it would be?
Well, yeah, I mean, the Epic started when early on, the people from Metal Hurlant came to see us, and they wanted us to be the American publisher of Metal Hurlant, and then of course it would be called Heavy Metal. So Stan was around, and we looked at this stuff, and his advice to me was, we can't do this. This is all like, it's way too violent. It's way too sexy. It's you know, that's not what we should have at Marvel. And so I said, well, why don't we do one that's story oriented? You know, let's work on let's have the same quality artists and better writers, and let's sell it with story. And that's why I said Archie Goodman, best guy in the world. I mean, maybe the best ever, creatively, editor, writer, could draw. I mean, amazing man. And so when we got him, he did a tremendous job. I wanted to have a Frazetta cover on the first issue, and before Archie signed on, I called up the Frazettas, and you don't get to talk to Frank, you get to talk to Ellie, who's like the gatekeeper. And I'm telling you, I said, hello, my name's Jim Shooter, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics. She hung up on me. She said, we don't like you, boink. What?
Yeah.
Anyway, so when Archie came in, I told him I tried to get a Frazetta cover. I said I couldn't even, you know, get her on the phone. And so he said, oh, I'll take care of it. He picks up a phone, dials, you know, hi, Ellie, it's Archie. And they're talking about the kids and this and that. Next thing you know, I got 2 Frazetta covers. So, I mean, he was, everybody loved him. He was a genius, and everybody respected him. And so that helped a lot. And it not only for the creator line, but it helped a lot for the whole line, because, having a guy like that, it just, that makes everything better. And I also learned from him. He was super smart. And I always try to keep learning and keep, honing my alleged skills. And you couldn't be in a room 10 minutes with Archie and not walk out smarter. So
Speaking of Archie, and just something that you managed to do in your time there, putting the right people in the right places to help with success, whether that be the right artist or the right writer on a certain book, combining talents. How did you, what was your process for coming up with some of these pairings?
well, I mean, I left a lot of it to the editors. I mean, I had been, before I became editor-in-chief, I'd been the editor of the whole line, the hands-on editor. And the editor-in-chief, I reported to him. Like I said, I was Mr. Spock. One guy trying to edit 45 color comics a month, that's hard. So one of the things I did was I was able to, my deal with the president was, if I save money or if I beat my projections, can I use that money? And he said he didn't think either of those things were possible. And so he said, I don't care, And so I did save, because when your books are late, you're always paying extra because you schedule printing time, you schedule separator time. If the book doesn't show up, you pay anyway. And so the first month I was there, we were supposed to publish 45 color comics. Only 26 made it out the door. That means for what, 19 of them, we're paying double. Well, like, once we were on time, that wasn't happening anymore. All of a sudden, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars that it's not being wasted. And once we rooted out some of the corruption and theft, there was more money that wasn't wasted. And I found ways to improve the coloring process and other things. And so there was money. And so I was able to use it and kind of make things better, raise the rates, raise them again, kept raising them, establish all these benefits, started paying for all materials. Not Marvel used to just provide the paper just because they didn't want pencilers to save money by using crappy paper. And so, but I said, no, work for hire. We provide all materials. And I got a little resistance from the financial officer, and the lawyer said, he's right. And, you have to. And so, anyway, I don't really remember the question, but we had money, and I saved money. And then once I got these good guys in, I then all of a sudden we're making more money because they made better books and turned it around. And now I remember the question, which was, how involved was I in pairing the creators and so forth? It depended. It was like, if it was a younger guy, a new guy, he'd hear from me more often. If it was Larry Hama, you don't have to tell him anything, and if you do, he'll get cranky with you. I know. And so and like, I never pestered Archie or Louise. I mean, but a lot of times we just have collegial discussions. Who should we get? And I'd make a suggestion, but I really did try to leave as much up to them as I could, because having been the editor and having been micromanaged by several editors in chief, I thought it was dumb. There's battlefield decisions have to be made, and you just can't wait around. Anyway.
No, I totally agree. And it's just something that you brought up a couple of times that I just wanted to mention is, it seems like you have this theory of make people feel important, make people treat them the right way, and you're going to get the best out of them. And that you had to go to bat to try to get these things done. Like you said, simple things, paying for supplies, insurance, things that, folks don't think about, but you had to bring it in so people wanted to work there, so people feel like what they were doing really mattered to you guys.
Yeah, really. And I mean, we paid other expenses. In those days, you paid per phone call. If you were on the phone with Marvel, we'll pay your phone bill. If you were shipping something, sending something, we'll pay your postage. If I ask you to come to the office, we'll pay your train fare. If you're coming from a long way, we'll fly you in and put you up in a nice hotel and feed you. So we tried to make it good, because I mean, all of us had been on the other side of that desk, so we knew what the problems were, and we tried our best to address every one of them. And so it was a really good. I put together the best group of people, and there'll never be a group like that again. And also we opened the door wide and made the opportunity good. And guess what? Diversity happens, and so we had a interesting mix of people, and wonderful, talented, excellent people. And if they knew what they were doing, they got out of the way. Then I just sort of conducted the orchestra, just coordinated. If they were new, I helped them and train them.
One thing that you did also, I was talking to Greg Goldstein a couple weeks ago about this, is licensed properties. And he was telling me how important they are, the lifeblood of a comic company, to have these as well as your original titles. Was that an uphill battle for you to say we need these licensed properties to mix in with what we have?
Well, Roy solved that problem for me, because nobody at Marvel. I didn't have a vote. This is before I was editor-in-chief. So I was just the editor, and I didn't really have a vote. But no one at Marvel wanted to do that, because the licenses can be expensive. And I think we kind of got a bargain with Star Wars, but still, in a company that's losing money, trying to talk to President Galton and convince him that we should spend these hundreds of thousands of dollars to get this license is real hard. Roy got that done. Roy sort of held his breath till he turned blue and convinced the powers that be. So he wasn't an editor then; he was a contract writer. But he still had Stan's ear, and he still had some clout, and he managed to get Marvel to take the Star Wars license. Well, Star Wars all by itself sold so well that it kept Marvel alive. Otherwise, we would have died. It kept us alive for a year. It gave me a year to turn it around. I mean, Roy bought me a year, and so we did turn it around. Well, after that, convincing somebody that we needed to spend money and get a license, I usually didn't have to ask, and B, we were being offered licenses constantly, and they would, of course, call our licensing department. And then sometimes the licensing people, I said no, and they would go to Galton and say, "Oh, it's great property. We should do it. It's called Starriers." And so I mean, so licenses came at me faster than I needed, but the truth is that a good license, if you put G.I. Joe on the newsstand, okay, there'll be a lot of people just walk right past Daredevil and Ghost Rider. They don't have fans. But they see G.I. Joe, especially the young kids, their eyes light up, and they got to have it. And so then they read it. They say, "Hey, this is fun," So maybe they go back and they try Daredevil, or they try Ghost Rider, Spider-Man, or Superman. We didn't care. We're trying to save this dying industry. We didn't care. Just get more attention to the comics. And so we did, very deliberately, have G.I. Joe, Transformers, Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and other ones that people would say, "Hey, I'm going to try that," and then maybe they like it, and then there was the bait, and so people would come in. We did the best we could with it. Archie was doing some Star Wars for us, not as part of the Epic line, but as part of the comics line. He was writing it for a while, and I think later he was editing. But and I think Mary Jo Duffy was writing, did a great job. But you know, I mean, that he did a fantastic job with that book. The Lucas people loved us, and so you know, we had a great relationship with them. That's how we got Raiders, and that I like to have several books out there that civilians, people who'd never opened a comic book, would like.
There's two other things that you did that I don't ever think get the credit they deserve is the Star line, because getting young children involved, and those young children can maybe become ones who look at the Spider-Man later on and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Also, for me, I know it's a little divided amongst fans. I thought the new universe was a smart idea because it set a flat surface. Everyone starts together. We're all starting at the beginning with this. We don't have to find out what happened 4 issues behind. I don't need to ask my friends, well, why did this happen now? We're all starting, all these readers, new readers and returning readers, starting here, and we're all going on the journey together.
Yeah, well, our first Star Comics, I mean, Harvey pretty much officially finally went out of business. They had published only, not even sporadically. I mean, they were almost nothing since 1978, and I think finally they even let go Sid Jacobson, who had been their editor forever. So, you know, it occurred to me, like, well, hey, you know, Epic is succeeding. The Marvel comics were just soaring. We were 70% of the market, and it was, the thing is, 70% in a growing market because it was booming. And DC, when I started, DC and Marvel were each about 30% and then also that was when the direct market started. Well, my guys made better books that helped the direct market stores. They got bigger. They bought more books. There were more stores, and so the market was just you know, growing like crazy. Marvel was doing so well, we became 70% of the market. DC fell to 18%. However, in the larger market, 18% was bigger than 30% used to be. Okay, so they were doing fine, but we just had a better market share. All right, so anyway, so we're doing real well with everything. Everything's doing real well, and I thought, and you know, talking to the guys, that maybe we should, you know, try young kids comics. So we'd made a couple little forays into that earlier. We did Smurfs, we did Dennis the Menace for a little while, just as regular Marvel comics. And what else? Something else. I can't remember. Oh, I know, Peter Porker. We just, you know, for the hell of it, we did, I think it was Larry Hama mostly, and Tom DeFalco who cooked that up. I thought it was funny as hell. I loved it. And so a couple little forays. So we thought, all right, let's start a line, you know, and we got Sid Jacobson, and that was a godsend. And of course, he knew all the artists, Warren Kremer, Ernie Colon, Anthro guy. Oh well, you know. And so we Howie Post, and we you know, we started, and it did pretty well. It wasn't setting the world on fire because that was an uphill fight. But another thing once again, I thought licenses. So I had a good relationship with TCFC, those characters from Cleveland, who were co-creators of the Care Bears. They created Strawberry Shortcake, Holly Hobby, all these nice properties. And so, and they liked me, and they liked us. And so I called there, and I got the Care Bears and a couple other things, Strawberry Shortcake, I don't know what. And they did pretty well, and they were the bait, and they also attracted people to the newsstand to try other things. And in the particular case of Care Bears was the #1 selling comic book in the UK. It did well here, but it was the #1 there. It outsold the X-Men, outsold Rupert the Bear, all that stuff. And so that was pretty good. I also got the license for Masters, same thing. Called up Joe Barrage, you know. and we had worked with Henson, and Henson once gave me personally a tour of Muppet Factory. So, you know, we knew them, they liked us, and so I was able to get, we couldn't get the Muppets, the main Muppet thing, but we got Muppet Babies, Fraggle Rock, maybe something else, I don't remember. But yeah, so we started a build thing, and then we knew it would be a slow build. It wasn't going to take off like a rocket. And so, but we were doing so well that, you know, we had plenty of time to build it, and it was doing pretty well right off the bat. And now back to New Universe. New Universe is dead on the ground the day we started, because sometime before our 25th anniversary, the PR person, Pam Rutt, PR, she called a meeting, and so it was all the vice presidents and Pam Rutt and the president. All right, so financial, circulation, me, and the meeting was to discuss what we're going to do about our 25th anniversary. So they go around the table, and we're getting all these brilliant ideas, like, oh, we'll do a coffee table book. Oh, yeah, that sets the world on fire. And so finally they come to me, and my first idea was start over. I said, you know what? This universe is 25 years old. It's kind of a tangled up, you know, in some ways. Why don't we announce in January that in June, the Marvel Universe ends. And we plan this event, we make it spectacular. And it's a countdown month by month, and all the titles end in June. And then in July, we start off with number ones, not quite as many, you know, just a choice selection. And we don't necessarily change it. We just do it better. We get rid of all the little dumb things, like Reed Richards fighting with the French underground in World War II. Iron Man's extremely unlikely origin in Vietnam. You know, the Hulk getting irradiated by an above ground nuclear test, which hadn't happened for decades. And you know, stuff like that. And also there's some dumb stories, like, I think Jerry Conway wrote this in, I don't know, but there was a one story where Hercules puts a chain around something in lower Manhattan and tows Manhattan out to sea. A, science says you're wrong, you know, but then B, later in the story, he tows it back with the same chain. So now the battery is up by the Bronx, right? I mean, you know, come on, you know, there's a bunch of bad stories. Spider-Mobile, get rid of the Spider-Man. So anyway, that's what I proposed, and I was shouted down. The circulation guy is, you idiot. We're 70% of the market. It's not broke. Don't fix it. You know, and the financial guys, well, we shouldn't be taking any risks there. You know, I said, those 6 issues will sell massive numbers. Okay, the countdown to the end. The last issue will sell enormously. I said, and that if we do it right, we'll be fine. The first issues will sell great. If we do it right, we'll be fine. Circulation director did not argue with me. He knew that was true, but he was just worried longer term. Yeah, but what if they don't like it as well down the road? All right, so okay, I shouted down, and then I said, all right, how about this? It's to celebrate the birth of the universe. Let's start another one. You know, everybody. So then I walked out of that meeting room with like $250,000 in development money, guaranteed royalties, marketing money, all the resources I needed, because we were doing really well. So you know, Marvel was able to invest in this new universe. A week later, the president calls me up to his office. I go in, he says, that budget we gave you, how much have you spent? I said, I don't know, a few $1,000s. He said, don't spend another penny. I don't want to spend a nickel on this thing. And I said, you mean you don't want us to do it? He said, oh, no, you have to do it. You just have to do it on staff, do it on the cheap. What? how are you going to convince Walt Simonson to give up Thor or do something new unless you can assure him he's not going to lose any income? You know, how are you going to, with no marketing money, how are you going to sell this thing? Like, you know, where am I going to get the talent if I can't pay people good rates or extra rates and make it a good opportunity? So if you look at the credits of the New Universe books, you'll see it's me, Archie Goodwin, who was a champion, helped me so much. He created 4 of those titles, and then a bunch of assistant editors. Look in the credits. There's a bunch of assistant editors. Why? Because they were the only people who could and were willing to stay after work and work on this and help me for free. All right. So, all right, well, we did the best we could, and some of that stuff was really had a lot to recommend it. But we couldn't get artists. I mean, we got a couple of really good guys, but they were brand new. Mark Texiera and Will Sportacio, who turned out to be stars, but they were brand new, and you know they weren't the hottest thing in the world yet. I was lucky because I had a couple of crazy people working for me. John Romita Jr. came into my office and said, hey, you got somebody to draw your book? Because I was going to write Starbrand. And I said, no. And he said, I'll do it. And I said, no, John. I said, you know, we're doomed. It's not going to succeed. It's going to be a disaster. I said, so you just stay where you are. Iron Man, X-Men, I don't know what it was. And he kept saying, no, I want to do your book. Just to help me. It's a favor to me. I said, all right, you're crazy, but okay. You know, later that day, I get a call from Al Williamson. He said, hey, I hear JR is going to draw your book. I want to ink it. I said, you guys are out of your minds. But out of their minds or not, Starbrand had world-class art. It wasn't because I pulled strings. It was because these guys were trying to help me. And that was great. So, you know, we did the best we could, but it was not likely to succeed. So, and by the time, I was 7 issues into it or so, I was gone. So nothing I could do about it.
Do you think if they had stuck with your vision, if you had had the funds, if you had been given the free reign, it would have been something we'd still be talking about today? Positive.
Oh, I think we would have knocked it out of the park. Some of those concepts that Archie came up with were dynamite. And I think, you know, because we were Marvel Comics, people would give it a look. And if it was any good at all, you know, it might have thrived. And we were trying, but it just was not likely to succeed. I mean, some good things were done. There were, you know, but there's some good stories. Archie wrote some stories, and his are excellent. You know, I did the best I could, but too much of it was kind of done by people who couldn't get any other work that week. You know, that's not good.
Jumping from Marvel to Valiant quickly, how important was it for you to have a fresh start, to be able to create something sort of brand new? Because it seems like at times you had ideas, but there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen that were sort of, you know,
yeah, I got things forced on me once in a while. Starriers, some toy, you know, when G.I. Joe and Hasbro, all the Hasbro stuff, Transformers were a big success. Next thing you know, I'm doing Sectars. It wasn't my idea. So there was some of that going on. Crystar, yeah. So it was. Well, anyway, I got out of Marvel and I needed a gig. And I worked for Disney for a year. I did scratched out jobs here and there, and finally, you know, I had to start something. And I started Valiant again. I got some older properties. They had been dormant. Magnus, Solar, Tora, others. But you know, I mean, it wasn't a matter of, oh, I have an exciting opportunity to create new stuff. No, it was desperation. I needed to live, you know, and so this was the only thing I could think of. I mean, if I didn't do that, well, you know, there weren't that many jobs out there. Also, Marvel done a pretty good job on damaging me. They blamed everything in the world on me, you know, and toward the end there, I mean, I was at war with the upstairs people because they were trying to sell the company and they were savaging my people. And so they sort of made an effort to try to diminish me, to cut me out of everything, to take away all the stuff that I introduced and my guys had built. And so by the time I left there, you know, the fanzines are making fun of me. The upstairs is, you know, just doing everything they can to hurt me. And that was the pariah of comics. And they didn't like me at all. And when I started Valiant, I mean, Marvel would actually take full page ads in the buyer's guide ridiculing me and Valiant. It was just, what? Come on, guys, grow up, Jesus. But you know what? Boundless enthusiasm and a never say die attitude. We produce some good stuff. With artists right out of the Kubert School, with guys, you know, we found like David Lapp, you know, who had been applying everywhere and nobody wanted him. I said, yeah, work for us. Genius kid. And then we started getting old guys that the big companies, nobody wanted them, you know. Nobody wanted Stan Drake. Are you out of your mind? Nobody wanted Ernie Colon, and nobody wanted Steve Ditko. He can't work for me. No, you know, and we had who else? With Don Perlin, of course. We had somebody else. Oh yeah, we had touch John Dixon, who was sort of Australia's answer to Stan Drake. Yeah, really good. And anyway, a bunch of old guys. Ralph Reese showed up. We had, you know, some big talent there. And all these kids out of the Kubert School, Joe taught them to be professional. And you know, if you asked them to do something, they said, yes, sir. And they did it the best they could. Well, when these older guys come in, guess who? The young kids are glomming onto them. They're listening to every word they say. And that was, so, you know, we had old guys who knew what they were doing and young guys who listened to the old guys. And you know, one way and another, we did some really good stuff. And in one, I was trapped into, the banker and evil partner trapped me into doing Nintendo comics and wrestling comics because they made money on that. And you know, it was really uphill fight. I knew those things weren't going to work, but I was kind of forced to do them. I would have quit, but then all the people would come to work for me, be out in the street, and they wouldn't be able to get a job because they'd been working for the pariah, you know. So I stuck with it. I figured if I can make these things work, I can make money and buy this turkey out. But neither were likely to succeed. But once we started doing superheroes, you know, in a little more than a year, about a year and change, we'd gone from 0 to 17% of the market, 17% of a still rather large market. And most of that came out of Marvel's side. And then they really didn't like me. And, you know, I'm not here to be liked. I wanted to make good comics and, you know, care about them. And we did well. And then, of course, just like Marvel, we were succeeding so well that my partner and by then his wife, the banker, who had me outvoted on the board, they decided to sell, and it got ugly, and I ended up out of there. And you know, and then of course, after a while, they blew it. They pissed it away. Can I say that? Anyway.
No, I think you're 100% right. But you know, from what you said, from the 17% in the market, it was the story-driven comics. These are comics that were done for people who love comics. Story-driven. Like you said, there's wonderful art. Barry Windsor Smith art in some of these are.
Yeah, there's some good art.
Yeah. And you guys were doing it at also, I think, $1.25 an issue. So it was a 25-cent price increase than a Marvel book, I think, at the time. But
I'm not sure about that. I think we were the same.
Oh, you were the same?
I think so, but I don't know. You might be, but we yeah. I mean, basically, we were looking at all these other people's books. This Image Comics, Marvel Comics, DC Comics. They're all doing the same thing. Very thin reads, fancy artwork. Well, we couldn't afford the fancy arts because, you know, they had more money than we did. And like I said, we had kids out of the Kubert School, and we got old guys nobody wanted. so I figured, like, well, what do we have to fight with? We can fight with story. I can outstory these guys, and we can outwork them. How about that? We'll just, we'll pour our hearts into this, and we did, and it worked. How about that? It was an uphill fight. I mean, it took us a few months to get going, but the word starts to spread. Hey, this stuff is fun, and then it kept because the fact that the first ones did not sell enormous numbers actually helped us, because then they go up in value. All the fans are paying attention to value. Hey, look at this, So we ended up doing pretty well, and just it's too bad that about greedy bankers and lawyers. But
did you guys consider yourself competition with Marvel and DC, or an alternative to Marvel and DC at the time?
Well, I mean, we were competing in the same market, but we weren't doing what they did, and could not care less what they did. It was really funny. Like I said, Marvel would routinely ridicule us. I mean, one of my writers went over there one time, and he comes back and he said, they have a Jim Shooter wall of shame, where all these make jokes and fun and nasty things on. I said, let them go. I said, the more the better, because we're going to win on the pages. We're going to win between the covers, and so. But so they would ridicule everything we did, like John Hartz, our marketing smart guy. He said, I wanted to introduce Rye, and he said, why don't we do it on the back of Magnus? That way, Magnus is selling really well, and that way a lot of people get introduced to Rye because they're going to buy Magnus, and we'll do it a flip book. I said, okay, front half Magnus, back half Rye, but the back half is also has a cover, could be the front half if you wanted. So we did that, and Marvel made fun of us. Within 6 months, they were doing flip books, and then we did the all black cover. And that one, John Hartz did not like that idea. He's that's going to be a disaster. I said, no, John, it's going to work. And of course, Marvel takes a full page ad ridiculing me. See, of course, the comic book companies, we all know what each other's doing like 4 months before, because we read the solicitations. So they knew that was coming up. They're making fun of it. 6 months later, they did an all red book, an all white book, and an all black book. Yeah. So, okay, fine. You laugh and then you do it. I don't know. A bunch of childish bozos.
I was going to say, how did you, because I met you actually briefly at Terrificon, and I just saw how the joy you have interacting with fans and being there and talking.
Oh, yeah.
How do you not get bitter from all the grief you've had to take from the industry, and just, how do you stay positive and just love comics as much as you do?
Well, I mean, what else is there to do? I mean, if you don't love it and care about it, I mean, I don't know what happens to you then. I always loved it, and also going to these conventions and meeting the people who made me a success. the guys who are paying my salary indirectly. I mean, of course I'm nice to them. I try to be. I mean, of course and my enthusiasm, my boundless enthusiasm, I guess shows. I don't know. I mean, like, we're all fans. If you're not a fan, you're not in this business. Nobody gets out of college and says, what industry should I get in? I think I'll try this comic book thing. No, we grew up our whole lives wanting to be in this, right? And I was gonna, when I was a little kid, I was gonna grow up and be a scientist. And I took all the science courses I could. I read science books on my own, chemistry, all that stuff. And I give you the whole litany, but the fact is, I never thought I was going to be in the comic book business. But when I got a job in the comic book business and I graduated high school, I just kept going. I liked what I was doing, and it was fun. And also, you know, it's not something that it's a thing a lot of people like to do, and there's just not enough opportunities to fit us all. So I was lucky, and I really appreciate it every day. Now, Larry Hama, I saw him at the convention. He said, and Larry's not one of these guys to, you know, gush about his personal feelings, but we're talking about something in the old days, and he said, I just couldn't wait to get to work every day. I know exactly how it feels. I mean, you know, it's like, and all the good people we had there, they couldn't wait to get to work every day. There's a few bad apples, but you know, that's going to happen. You know, 75 staffers and 400 freelancers.
But you know, like you said, it was successful. People felt acknowledged. They felt like they belonged there because of how you made. You put out wonderful books. I mean, bottom line, you put the company in a wonderful position going forward because of the work you put in. And I think,
yeah, I think so. And I like I told Galton, I said, no, we're gonna be big, and because I mean, I knew there could be movies and so forth. I knew the technology was advancing. I wasn't an expert on it, but you could see. And then when in 1978, when Superman came out, the first Superman movie, and it got good reviews, and it was playing the packed houses. I said, this is it. This is the beginning. This is the watershed, right? And so I took my whole crew, which was only about 35 people then. I took them to the movies. The only show we could get into was the Crack of Dawn show. So I said, everybody, come in early tomorrow. We're going to the movies. And we marched across town, got into the theater, bought everybody popcorn, and we watched. I told, we have to watch this. This is important. This is a major moment in our history, right? The history of our industry. And we watched. Everybody enjoyed it. I saw. I wish they'd called me, asked me questions. You know, I saw a couple of things. Like, oh, no, guys. Anyway, but no, everybody liked it. I liked it. And the funny end of that story is that when we all go parading back into the office, it's, I don't know what, you know, it's getting near lunchtime. Stan, whose office was still in New York at that point, like he looks out of his office and he sees us trooping down the hallway, and he says, where were you? And I said, oh, I took everybody to see Superman. He said, and you didn't ask me? I said, it never occurred to me. But anyway, yeah, so I knew it was all going to explode. And I knew it. And I think that you know, it did. And video games, movies, streaming, TV shows, stuff like that. So it all did happen. I think it would have happened slightly differently if I'd stayed there, but I think it was going to happen.
I want to be mindful of your time, so I just have one last question, which is,
sure,
how does comic industry now bridge the gap from comic fans who just like the movies to turn them on to picking up some of these issues, back issues, current issues, and learning about the characters? Is it possible, or has the ship sailed on that?
It's definitely possible. The secret to success has not changed for 40,000 years in the storytelling business. It's tell a good story and tell it well, make it mean something. Okay, right now there's very little relationship between the comics and the movies, and also the comics, a lot of them, I'm sorry to say, aren't very good. They're even the ones, I mean, some of the artists are brilliant, but they're not worried about telling the story as much as they should be. And so what you get is basically their first concern is, how much am I going to get for this original art page when we sell it at a convention? Well, why don't you worry about telling the story, and then that'll take care of itself, because you know there'll be a lot of demand for that page. But you run into that a lot, that they're not focused on telling a story. You also a lot of these writers, they've gotten, first of all, in comics, I mean, guys who really don't know how to write at all. They don't understand story, they don't understand structure. You they're clever and glib with the dialogue and stuff like that. But you could pick up a book and you have no idea who these guys are or what's going on, and there's no structure to it. It's a bunch of random events, or non sequitur events that why this happen? What's going on here? I always joke that nobody knows it, but Indiana Jones was a great ballroom dancer. Why don't we know that? Because we didn't need to, and yet in the comics they just wander around and they're not thinking about the fundamentals of story and storytelling. So some of the books aren't good, and there's this glacial decompressed storytelling that they do where it takes like 12 issues to tell a story, or at least 4 or 5 because they're writing for the trade paperback, or it's just they've lost, they forgot what business they're in, and you're in the business of entertainment. I mean, the thing is, every damn book that's somebody, when they put it down after reading it, they should feel like that's the best couple bucks they ever spent, and they would be really thrilled with it. Can't wait for the next one. And like the best next issue ad, the best next issue blurb is to make this one great, and they just they forget all that stuff, and I don't know what they're doing. So even if they try to coordinate more with the movies, I'm not sure that they have I don't think they have the horses right now. I don't think they have the horses. So but I mean, I never say die. I really think that you all we need is for somebody to come along and and care about it and turn it around. And I think that the potential's there. People say, "Oh, well, print media, it's over." No, it isn't. You go to these conventions. It just came from 20,000 people who are thrilled about print media, and that's in Columbus, Ohio. Holy cow! So it if you build it, they will come.
Makes sense. Well, sir, as a fan, I just want to thank you so much for not only taking the time, but all that you've done for the comic industry. You sort of made it what it is, and for us fans, so many wonderful books that were part of your run. So thank you again.
And welcome back, everyone. Fascinating stuff. I've been a big Jim Shooter fan. I hope that didn't come through. I didn't be too fanboy in this interview, but it's hard not to. It's a man who I respect so much. And I think, people need to realize the tough position he was put in to begin with at Marvel, that they wanted to shut the doors on Marvel, and he was fighting like anything to keep things going, to streamline things, to make it profitable again. And, for him to be able to do that in that climate, it's saved Marvel for the most part.
Yeah, Oren, stellar interview as always. Jim is a fascinating figure, and I love getting to hear, his perspective on a lot of things that happened, particularly at Marvel, where you hear a lot of stories, you hear a lot of crosstalk about those experiences and things that happened during those times. Some high highs, probably some low lows, and it's great to kind of get it out into the open. I mean, it's part of comics history, and we're just thrilled that we had the opportunity to, expose that and give a platform to more stories about that era in Marvel and in comics. So that'll do it. Oren, again, great job. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for viewing it. If you are on YouTube, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps us get out there and get more of these great comics figures for us to interview and to bring to you. And we'll see you next time.